My name's Brent Hannam. I'm 50, from New Zealand originally, and my occupation is I work offshore on an oil rig where I run the rope access and rescue team. And fun fact, I was in a firefighter calendar once. Before coming to New Zealand, I was a firefighter, and to raise money for child cancer, we did the calendar. So that was pretty cool. So from New Zealand originally, and I met my wife in New Zealand. She is Canadian from Mississauga, and that sort of made us choose Canada in the sense that, she did like New Zealand. She wanted to move there. I wanted to move to Canada, and in the end, I came here for a little bit to do some things with the fire service. And then when we got back to New Zealand, we decided, where do we stay? And so we ended up coming back here. 2007 is when we came here. Coming to Burlington, it was all to do with the fire department. It was why we chose Burlington. We looked at Burlington and we looked at Milton because they both have composite fire departments, and I wanted to get back onto fire. Burlington was the biggest city, had the bigger fire department, so that was a big aspect of why we chose Burlington. The other side to it was, 2007, Burlington was in the developmental stage, if you want to say. So there was a lot of opportunity here. Burlington is central to everything that I need for work, with the industrial side over there. Toronto obviously there. So it's in the middle of everything. And then the lake, coming from New Zealand, being on an ocean, the lake, not so much an ocean, but it's a big body of water, and that's sort of why we chose here. Hopes and expectations was to get onto fire, right? That was the big push, because being on the fire service back home, obviously I wanted to carry it on here. That was the big goal, but then things took a different path, right? I found work in another industry that was just financially a better option. So that's why I ended up going to oil and gas versus fire. So, to be honest, it wasn't overly hard, right? Financially, we had to prove we had the funds, quite a substantial amount of money to live off if I couldn't find work. Because I didn't get a work visa straight away. So we had to prove that we had the means to survive if I couldn't work. But the whole process didn't take long. I know it has taken long for some people. I guess I was lucky it didn't take very long at all. When I say not long, I think maybe 6 months from when I submitted it to when Immigration Canada said, okay, you can look at coming to Canada. So no, it wasn't a hard process. It was pretty good, to be honest. Very stress-free, actually. I know it hasn't been for others, but it was good for me. So yeah, for her, it was proving that the whole relationship was true, right? I wasn't just coming over here and the goal was to marry her, get Canadian citizenship, and then off I go somewhere else. We weren't even planning marriage, to be honest. At that point, I'd only just met her maybe, I'd say, a year and a bit, prior to that. For her it was just, there was a lot of reference checks and things like that from her perspective, and of course mine, but it was just proving that the relationship was valid. It seemed to be the big thing from immigration. When I first met my wife, I was working on the fire department, right? I was on a night shift, and I was on the medical unit, and we got called to her, right? She was on an aircraft coming into New Zealand, and she was tagged as a possible drug runner, right? Because of symptoms that she was showing on board the aircraft. So obviously she wasn't a drug runner, but what the medical condition was she was in Australia on holiday. She traveling around South Pacific. She got bitten by a mosquito, and the mosquito, was infected with this virus called Burma forest virus. You don't have it here in Canada. There's a handful of people with it that caught it outside of Canada. So anyway, she had this virus. So part of the symptoms was, her profuse sweating, her eyes were bloodshot. Really just, she felt terrible on board the plane. But to the air crew, they thought that she had, drugs inside her, and they had burst, and they were showing symptoms. So we got called to her. We took her off the aircraft, and then we ended up taking her to hospital. Of course, she didn't want to cancel the trip and go to hospital. She wanted, because she was going from New Zealand to Hawaii. But we put a stop to that, took her to hospital. She was admitted for a couple of weeks in New Zealand. So that was the start of the relationship, right? Because when she got out of hospital, I was back at work, and I just happened to be walking through the airport, and she come through the door, right? So I was like, well, how are you feeling? And she was fine, and then she dropped a card off, a thank you card at the fire station, and said, if you're ever in Canada, here's my email and phone number, look me up. And I just happened to be coming to Canada, actually to Niagara Falls and Windsor. I was doing some firefighter competitions there. So, coming to Canada, basically phoned her up and said, okay, well, I'm going to these cities if you want to come and watch the competitions, and she did. And then afterwards, she came back to New Zealand with me. So I had to prove to immigration that that was true. So I had to get the reports from the fire service to say that yes, that's how we met. So right back to that day, I had to prove to immigration. So I gave them copies of everything, the medical reports for the fire service, the ambulance, hospital. Yeah, so there was quite a bit involved to say that it was valid, So.
I was thinking maybe just a couple of pictures of you guys,
No,
but no,
no.
the whole story of how you met.
Yeah, it was everything.
Wow.
They were pretty thorough, right? So Canada is, and Burlington, Toronto. Toronto is such a big city. I'm not overly keen on big cities like that. Burlington is nice and reasonably small. So coming here, I found it pretty similar to New Zealand, population-wise and, traffic-wise. It wasn't too much of an issue really to come here from that perspective. What I found different was the foods, right? Foods, I like to eat. So, it was one of those things where I couldn't work, so I spent a lot of time in Starbucks down on Brent Street there. And I was just studying for the fire service to try and get on the fire service. And to me, there's just so much here that even though population-wise it's similar, but it's the little things that are different. So
What's so different about food?
Well, okay, I can use Starbucks as an example. Even though Starbucks universally across the world is Starbucks, but they're all different wherever you go, right? So in New Zealand, we just have, the coffee tastes different, the food is different. Back home we have like different scones, different biscuits, cookies. So here it's Canadian, I guess, Canadianised to match the population. So yeah, and like I say, I like to eat, so I was sampling lots of stuff. But for me specifically, the work side to it, we don't have in New Zealand an industry specific to rescue, like private rescue. We don't have that. Whereas Canada, we do. So I found that interesting because like that opened up all the doors for me. Like I say, I was trying to get on fire, but that there opened up avenues to different industries across Canada, which is what I'm in now, and that it's not how it is back in New Zealand. So that to me that was surprising, but in a good way. And to anybody else, it really it's probably irrelevant, but because they don't work in it, but it is a pretty interesting facet to working in Canada. There's a lot of opportunity.
Can you explain what the difference between like a private rescue is compared to other rescues?
Okay, so private rescue, for instance, if you look across the harbour there, in the bay, you have all that industry, right? You've got US Steel, you've got Colombian Chemicals over there, Dofasco. They all have, most of them, the big ones, all have their own private fire services and security. Hamilton obviously has Hamilton Fire Department that oversees everything, but those individual companies, based just purely on the size that they are and the hazards that they have on site, they bring in private contractors to provide a service, which is the rescue service. So, like for instance today, US Steel, there's probably work going on in confined spaces or at height. You can't rely on the fire department to do the rescues promptly because Hamilton Fire is a busy fire department. They are out and about, so the initial response is the private side to the rescue service, and then of course Hamilton would come in and take over. So
it's like private first and then
yeah, it just provides a faster response time, right? Because if I'm sitting in this room and the work's happening over there, obviously I can get there quicker than Hamilton Fire or any fire department. I'm just using them as an example. They obviously still respond because they have overall command, but just that initial to help get the ball rolling, it's the private side to it. That is the industry that is pretty interesting.
Are there like prerequisites that a certain country or place needs to have private services before?
No, it's all based on local regulations, right? So Ministry of Labour for Ontario, they put in the regulations for, in particular, confined spaces is the big one. You can't go into a confined space without having a means of rescue, and that could be you've hired private individuals or companies to carry out the rescue, or it could be they have their own people trained up. They've got to have something. They just can't go into a confined space and hope it goes well. I miss the beaches. I miss the ocean. Even though I work on the ocean, it's not the same. Oceans are different, right, wherever you go. I mean, it's like Burlington Beach. Burlington Beach, I love it, right, because it looks just like a big beach with a quiet ocean. There's no waves. But no, New Zealand, I miss the beaches. I miss the ocean. I miss the mountains. So, yeah. And it's not as busy. New Zealand is more laid back. It's only a small population, 5 million people. So it's small, not as hectic. I think for me it was like you got to keep busy, right? If you're not busy, then you start getting idle, and then things can take a turn, for the worse from that point. So for me, it was all about trying to keep busy, trying to keep the skills up, right? Because ultimately my goal was to get on fire, so I had to maintain those skills to apply for fire. And that's the other side to it, is Canada has so much training available for all trades, but firefighters in particular, there's so many courses you can do to upskill. So I had enjoyed my time doing that, and like I say, it all opened up other doors to different industries. So yeah, it's been pretty good.
Is it always like continuous training courses that they offer?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, like they all have expiries, right? Some expire in a year, like basic first aid, but Others are sort of 3 years, but it's continuous. I think it has, like, one thing I noticed about Canada, and I'm only speaking for the people that have been around in the trades, is they are very, what do you call it, motivated, right? The tradespeople. You know, I've worked in Alberta a lot, and then of course offshore now, but the tradespeople, they are forever upskilling their certificates. You know, they don't stop. And to me, it's pretty impressive to see. They don't just get sort of static in a job, in a role, and stay at that level. They are forever upskilling, and that to me was pretty impressive, because I never really saw that back home in New Zealand. But you know, in the fire service, and that New Zealand's fire service is a little different to Canada. We're a little bit sort of behind, if you want to say, traditionally, and you guys follow the Americans. We were following the British, so the fire services are different, if that makes sense. We have red trucks, but it's different procedures, different things like that. So, yeah.
Is there like a big learning curve adjusting to the Canadian system?
It was, you know, like, but I think that's anything, right? It doesn't matter what job you're doing. If you're told one way, and then you go to another workplace and they do it differently, you're going to have to relearn anyway. It doesn't make that one any, you know, it wasn't wrong how they did it. They just, this company does it different or whatever. So it's one of those things you adapt. I would just with what my wife's family is, right? So like I say, they are very, I mean, it just, to me it's a Canadian thing. It is just, Christmas is really involved, you know, and like I say, even birthdays. I find birthdays here, but see, that could just be my family back home. Maybe we just were low key. Here, everything is up here. So, you know, is it the New Zealand sort of we're all chill type thing, and here everybody is more, I don't know, involved. Like that's what I don't mind it. I like it, right? Because it's different to what we experience back home. And I think they're very similar. Like, you know, like I say, I mean, you know, English obviously predominant language for both countries. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you just go back a couple of hundred years, the ships that were coming here, they were going to New Zealand and Australia too, right? So the same people that were coming this way went down further. I mean, ultimately, like, I've got this little old Bible, right, from 1804, and in it has, I forget what he is. He's like my 4 times great-granddad, I guess. But he settled in St. Catherine's, right? So, you know, the letters I have show the boat ended up in Nova Scotia, and then he made his way to St. Catherine's, and then I don't know why he didn't stay there, but then he went from there to New Zealand. So those people, they're all bringing the same traditions from England, Ireland, Scotland to here, and then on to New Zealand, and it has just, we're sort of built up at the same speed.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, organisations and things like that, for me it is hard to be part of, because I'm away for 6 months of the year, right? And you know, organisations require some sort of commitment, and you know, and if you go back to when I first came to Burlington, I joined the volunteer fire department, right? But when I was working away in Alberta, I never met the percentages that were required to stay with the fire department. So, you know, I couldn't carry that on. It was either work or try and make the calls, and of course I was working out there 10 days on, 10 days off. So, and then of course out St. John's, Newfoundland, I'm working 21 on, 21 off. So, it's hard to commit, back here. But local organisations that I do enjoy really is the Burlington Historical Society, right? I mean, my wife would just call me a geek, but it's one of those things where, I love the history, and that's any town, not just Burlington. Wherever I travel to in Canada, I'll always buy a book about what the local history is, just to read it, right? And then go around and see the things that are in the books. So I do like that, right? That side to Burlington, and that little organisation, what they do. Yeah. So, I like resources for local resources. I think for me it was, and I know it sounds pretty bad, but just everything was job specific when I got here. Right? I had to get this. I had to get on to this job. So all your time is spent, trying to reach those goals, I guess. But resources-wise, the fire departments here in Canada, even though Canada is so big, everybody is connected somehow. So the fire departments, the firefighters are a great resource to just help with any questions about trying to get on or skills. What skills you need to upskill to get. I found that side to it really good, but I know that's boring. It's just job specific, but that to me was one of the biggest helps. Because New Zealand's not like that. I mean, maybe it is now, but back then it wasn't when I left. So.
Is it more word of mouth, or are there organizations that you join and then you just post on
No, I think it's more just word of mouth, right? Yeah. Organizations, I mean, those firefighter competitions that I was doing for FireFit, even though you have the big overall fraternity of firefighters, that the FireFit competitions narrow it down to just like-minded people as well. Any skill set. I mean, rope rescue is a small thing as well. We all know each other. It's one of those things, and I would say that's, anything, any job specific. I mean, you could say lifeguards on a beach. I know Burlington doesn't, but whether you were a lifeguard here or in Toronto, it's a small group of people that word of mouth would be, a better option. And then, like you're talking about home resources, we're talking to home in that. The only thing that's been helpful is Facebook, and I know that's terrible because Facebook's terrible, but it is one of those things that communication-wise, like I say, I've got 6 sisters. To talk to them in all the different places that they are is, I mean, it's so helpful to just be able to on your phone or whatever. Pretty amazing. So, yeah. How would I describe it? I don't know. I think you've really got to get out and about, right? Like I'm forever down here, whether it's at the beach or I ride my bike along that path, or I walk the dog, and everybody seems to be pretty friendly, right? Like it doesn't matter where you go, you're always running into somebody down here, right? Like Burlington's a big city, but it doesn't seem big, like population-wise, there's a lot of people. But like look out there, like there's hardly anybody walking around. There's a couple of people here, but it's one of those things that you can run into somebody everywhere, all over Burlington, and everybody's pretty good. So yeah, it is a nice place. But I find like lots of places in Canada are like that, right? Working in St. John's is just again, I think it's a Canadian thing, Canadians I find are pretty friendly. I think that's a tough one because I think so much depends on the person. Like I just happen to be lucky. For me, it was a stress-free situation to immigrate here, And like I've said before, I know for some people it's not stress-free in the slightest, right? So it's one of those things you've just got to, and you know, I say you just got to try and hang in there and work through it. But I know for some people it's difficult, you know, and for me it wasn't, and that sort of makes me feel a bit bad. But yeah, wow, I mean, jobs, you know, jobs and housing, obviously the big main ones for Canada. It's in the news all the time. You know, there seems to be a lot of work out there, but the trouble is the cost of living, right? You know, to survive, yes, you can get a job, but if the job's not paying you well enough, you're going to struggle in cities where the cost of living is getting up there. And you know, I mean, Burlington being in the middle of, you know, of all these other cities surrounding it, naturally the cost of living here is obviously going to be higher than, let's say, St. John's, Newfoundland. So yeah, struggle-wise, that I think is going to be one of the biggest things. But I also think you've really got to, like, Canada has a lot of opportunities for jobs that you may not see yourself, like, ever have worked in. Like, there's no way, if you'd asked me in 2006, when I was looking at coming here, that I could make a living, you know, climbing a rope, right? Like, who would ever think that you could climb a rope and make a living doing it? But here we are in Canada, and you could do it in New Zealand too, but Canada is so big that you have more opportunity here, right? So I think you've got to sort of look outside your field, and there's always more opportunity. Yeah. Again, it's one of those things, right? Like I've come from New Zealand. New Zealand is basically a little mini Canada or a mini Australia. It's not Turkey, right? It's not Iran or Iraq. If you're coming from the south, I think you have an easier path than coming the opposite way, right? So I don't think there's any similarities, to be honest. It's, I don't know, I hate using the word privilege, but that seems more privilege coming my way than the other